Welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing a critical review of Napoleon at War. So Napoleon at War, I have the rulebook because I want to show all the cool reenactment photos in here, because they chose not to go with painted miniatures. They actually chose to go with got photos of people doing Napoleonic reenactment, which is a really interesting choice, and I quite like it. I didn't think it was enough to put in the positive section, but I want to show it off anyway. So let's start with how do these things work? Let's start with that. So 5 good things, 3 things that are a bit and 1 thing that makes the game unique. So let's kick it off with number 1. It's complex. Napoleon at War is a complex game. I'll go into the complexity in the review itself, but it's a complex game, and I like that. I think that a divisional game that this is a divisional level game, should be complex. Finding infantry should not just be a case of rolling dice and then I'll just move away when I feel like it, or you'll just charge me when you feel like it, and everyone else will just stand around and watch while we have a little thing. It's a complex game. You have counter-charging, you have bubbles of control, you have counterfire, you have the artillery ricochets. You have to be careful where you put units and how you target stuff. It's a very complex game, and we're going to get into that. But I just want to say, number 1, my biggest point is that it's a game with a lot of depth. You can actually abandon the guns. So, for example, if you say you're artillery and you get charged, you have 4 options. Basically, you can stand and fight, you can fire, anyway. And one of the options is to fire that gun, pull that. They wouldn't have lanyards, but you could, hit the touch thing hit the linstock to the touch hole, set the last shot off, and then run back to an infantry unit. And once the enemy moves 4 inches away from those guns without spiking them, you can then reoccupy the guns, which is something you don't see in a lot of Napoleonic games. It's generally all or nothing. So generally, if artillery get charged, they'll either be wiped out or just run away and never come back. Whereas this, you can actually have the guns become almost a mini objective, because if the enemy's left within 4 inches of the guns, with no one around them, then they'll spike those guns and you can't use them again. But you can almost have this sort of, okay, so they've taken the gunners are back of the unit, we've got to push back and take that unit back, so we've got to push back and drive them off so we can take the guns back and then put firepower down. It's a complicated game, and it lets you do cool things, which is what all games should do. Number 2, the firefight system. When you are within 6 inches of an enemy, which is the range at which firefights happen, you must engage them. There is none of this, I'm not going to shoot, even though I'm in range. There is none of this. This isn't a case of I go, you go. Although it is an I go, you go game. You activate a brigade at a time. But what happens is, once you get involved in a firefight, you must fire. Even if you don't actually want to roll dice, the enemy still gets to return fire. So firefights are resolved almost like a melee in a lot of other games, in that you work it out and then you move on to the next. And both sides get a go. So you have to be very careful about how you approach a firefight. For example, say you approach, when you approach a unit, say you approach a unit and they've got a unit that can cover them. Well, the unit that can cover them and is also within arc of fire of you can add their own dice. You have to be careful not to engage the enemy with too bigger numbers. You have to know that So the way a firefight works is you must always engage the enemy if you're within 6. You can choose not to roll dice, but that just means the enemy's going to shoot at you and you're not going to shoot at them. This can be useful if you want to kill a unit. Sometimes you do actually want to kill a unit. Sometimes you got a crappy conscript unit and you have a nice big guard unit or a cuirassier unit behind you. Want to get that charge in. So you're like, just die. Or you deliberately want them to run away. Something like that. And the firefights are complicated. And again, this game is not a complicated game, but it's a complex game. So, there is supporting fire involved. The defender, you fire, then the defender fires. They work the firefight out, and then you move on to the next thing. There's no, well, I'll move up in my turn, shoot at you, and then you'll take a reaction test before you get a shot back. And if you pass that reaction test, then in your turn you can shoot at me, and I'll do a reaction test. It's these firefights are resolved as like a melee is resolved in that. Okay, 2 units will come into contact. You guys work this out. Sometimes you'll have a stalemate and they'll stay engaged, but a lot of the time you'll have 2 units engaged, one of them will back off, and then it's up to you to take advantage of that breakthrough, to push that gap there. And I like that. I don't like this system of, well, the French come on and I get like an Overwatch shot because, well, then I'm firing before the French, and that's not really some British. That's not really, well, why would I fire before them? Then they don't really have an incentive to come close. Or you get a system where it's, well, and then if I fire at them and they fail their morale, then they've run away and they didn't even get a chance to fire. Whereas this firefight mechanic is much better, because it literally breaks it down, and it breaks the battle down into this little section that's happening here, and these two units are squabbling, and then something happens, and then you go, as a brigade commander, you can then go, right, I'm going to have this unit in my brigade come over here and go through, or great, that's opened up a big line in the enemy. Infantry units go like that, make a little wedge, cavalry will pour through that hole. There's so many tactical options, and the firefight system really enables that. I hope I've made it clear. Having an equal and mutual trade-off of firepower, I think, really adds tactical value, because it's not just about what your units can do. It's about what the enemy can do to you, and how battered they are, and maybe you have to stand off for a turn or two. Maybe you do have to sit back and soften them up with artillery. Or maybe you've softened them up in artillery in one place, but not in the other, so you're going to press the attack in the center and not on the flanks. I really like the fact that a war game can actually have you think like a general. You don't just put units down in an actual Napoleonic game, an actual Napoleonic battlefield, and just charge everything at once. You soften the enemy up. You know that when you get in contact with them, they're also going to be firing back at you, and it's actually quite rare to just fire a volley and then see an enemy run away. The only really time an enemy would run away like that is if you fired a volley and then followed up with a bayonet, which you can do in this, and it is reflected. But for firefights, which is standoff trading shots, I think this is much more realistic, it's much more efficient, and it's much more tactical for a game. Number 2, the rules are extremely clear. Part of having a complex game is having a friggin' detailed rulebook, and the rulebook is extremely clear. In fact, I'll actually open it up here. It's very well broken down. There are diagrams for literally everything. Everything you could possibly want has a diagram. Look at that. That page is literally just diagrams with some words on it. Everything is written down very clearly. It's all put in dot point form. Again, this is one of the most clear rulebooks I've ever picked up in my entire life. You will very rarely, if ever, have rule disputes between two people. You don't need rule lawyers. There are, to my knowledge, no FAQs for this book, but I could be wrong. This book is quite old, and this edition is out of print, but we're going to get to that. I should show you some of the artwork too while I'm doing this. Anyway, this is a very clearly laid out rulebook. So you can see down there's some sort of hussars. Or French, I think they're hussars. It's so well laid out. It's so clear. The backgrounds do not distract from the thing at all. There are some rulebooks you pick up, and the paper they have it printed on has like a not quite. So you can see here, it's almost like a little. It's almost done in like a modelled. I don't know how that well that's shown, but it's sort of like an artificially yellowed, like matte finish type deal, which is cool. You can actually see what's behind it. I've seen some rulebooks where they try and make it look like it's printed on actual parchment, and you can't read the damn things. So, it's very clear. Visually, it's very well laid out. It's got there's one. There's the 60th Rifles. So, it's got source material in the book. It's very well laid out. It's got designer's notes at the back. It has a fantastic index. All wargame books must have indexes. Those without are going to get smashed in these reviews. Watch out, Force on Force. Oh boy, you're going to cop it for that. Anyway. It's a fantastically laid out rulebook, and it's fantastically clear, and it's well written, and it's written by people who you can tell have been gaming a long time, and they've got a lot of bugbears they don't like, and they've very clearly clarified those things in the rulebook. Number 4, the system of maneuvers and engagement. So the way this works is, if you're not in the enemy zone of fire, you can maneuver, and what a maneuver is basically a way of saying, right, you don't engage with the enemy, you don't need to do a test to change formation, you don't need to worry about wheeling, you just move the command base and then everyone else just files in around them. You don't need to worry about anything really. It's very cool. We're very casual until we actually start having bullets shot at us. So if you're basically out of range in artillery and there's no enemy cavalry around you, you can have a pretty cruisy way to move around. However, once you get close to those enemy cavalry, or you get within 6 inches of enemy infantry, It doesn't have to be in the front, by the way. It can be on the side as well, as long as you're within proximity. Those infantry could easily turn around and come at you if they pass their order test. So you're both sort of scared in a standoff, and you're like, well, we don't want to do the thing, because if we do the thing, then they could turn and shoot us. So we're going to sit here where we are, even though we'll keep an eye on them, but if they start moving, we're going to start moving too. A sort of thing like that. With cavalry, that's 12 inches. Cavalry this is something I love. Your cavalry is actually useful. In a lot of black powder games, the cavalry is either an overpowered sledgehammer, underpowered Nerf gun, or a wait till the battle's over anyway, and then I just charge your unit in the rear to be a dick. In Napoleon at War, the cavalry is an aerial denial weapon. And it's not an aerial denial weapon in the fact that you're relying on your psychology of your opponent. You're not saying, well, I'm going to move my cavalry here, and then he'll see what I've done there, and then he won't move units into that area. It's literally, there's a 12-inch bubble, and if you want to do anything complex around these cavalry, you're going to have to start doing tests. The cavalry effectively can screen the army. The cavalry can screen the army from sort of a little gap in between the infantry units. The cavalry don't actually have to be able to charge. It's all about their presence. Anyone who's seen my videos on La Haye Somme, especially the 5th KGL Line Battalion under von Umpteder, will know what I'm talking about here, where the mere presence of cavalry in an area is enough to make infantrymen think twice. Conversely, your own friendly cavalry can intercept enemy cavalry charges. So cavalry have gone from a sledgehammer, although they still are a sledgehammer, they've gone from a combat unit to almost like a support unit, which is the way they were used. The cavalry are a sledgehammer. If you get an infantry unit in the flank, oh boy, are they dead. Well, if you get an infantry unit anywhere, they're dead. If you catch infantry in line with cavalry, you're in for a fun time. But almost always infantry will form square, or they'll have their own units to countercharge in. It's quite rare to actually get a full-on cavalry charge off, but it's glorious when it happens. But cavalry are more a support unit that enables infantry to function. They're not a main battle unit, unless you have something like cuirassiers. And if you have cuirassiers, then they're 500 points, which is a quarter of the standard size is 2,000 points. So if you have cuirassiers, it's eating up a huge chunk. Again, it's a points-based system. I didn't want to include that. I know I always talk about creative freedom. There's points batch and there's scenarios, which is awesome because you can design your own with a bit of balance. See my other videos if you want to talk about creative freedom. There's so much good stuff. I didn't want to put that in here, but it is done like that. And so yeah, you can take big sledgehammer cavalry units. You just won't have much of anything else. So I really like the way they've done that. Another thing I'll mention here, just because it didn't fit anywhere else, and it is a unique point of the game, but it's not big enough to be put in the end, is that the system of removing casualties. This is a base removal game. And the way it works is, if you take 1 hit, 2+ save. 2 hits, 3+ save. 3 hits, 4+ save. 3 hits, 4+ save. 4 hits is a dead base. 5 hits is a dead base and a 2+ save. 6 hits is a dead base and a 3+ save. And it just keeps going up. So you'll never lose your entire unit because you failed a whole bunch of saves, because you only ever have to make 1 save. And it's never going to be worse than a 4+, because once it gets over a 4+, it's just a dead unit. The game actually uses 4+ quite a lot. Not to the extent that Force on Force does. Guess what's going to be a big positive in the Force on Force video. But it uses 4+ quite a lot. To hit as a 4+, raw units have to reroll successes. Elite units get a few extra dice in the pool. It's really cool system of I'm not a huge fan of base removal games, but this is at least doing it right in that it's not just, okay, I hit with a whole bunch of dice, make a whole bunch of saves, or no saves at all, and remove a whole bunch of bases. This is actually, you know exactly how many bases are going to come off. You know exactly what your save is going to be. It's a really nice way of doing it. Anyway, so that was actually maneuvers and engagement, about how that works. Anyway, on to number 5. Number 5, this book has excellent quick reference sheets. Sheets, plural, because every army comes with a... I don't think there's actually ones in this book, except you have to download them separately. But each army comes with its own... Oh, no, there are some in here. These are all... This is the quick reference sheet. There's 1, 2. They're fantastic. They have everything you need. They break the game down very, very neatly, which is very important with a complex game, and I don't think they're actually the ones I'm looking for in here. I'll pop one up here. There's a quick reference sheet. These are freely available to download, and they're old, so I'm pretty sure this is okay. Anyway, and the company who makes this game sold it to another company. We're going to get to that. So I'm not sure how these work legally. Anyway, you can see here that anything that has a special rule, the special rule is below. Once you know what the letters mean, you know what the letters mean. It tells you how many bases are in each unit, what the unit's called, what its values are. These quick reference sheets are amazing. The actual game quick reference sheet is amazing. It breaks down the turn order. The amount of quick reference sheets that don't break down the turn order drives me insane. You have to have the turn order on there. You have to know what you're doing, when you're doing it, how you're doing it, in what order. And I know that sounds like a lot to ask for a quick reference sheet, but it doesn't take long to go movement, select brigade, hand out orders, move brigade, hand over to the enemy. They repeat, end of turn. That's just how you do your movement. That's just having that on a QRS for the first few games, or even for later games when you're sort of like, I forgot, we haven't played this in 6 months. How do we do this again? It's so handy. Flames of War does this really well as well. Try playing Flames of War, switching over from 3 to 4 without that quick reference sheet, and you'd have a hell of a time doing it. So, quick reference sheet is amazing, and I think it's big enough to be able to qualify as my 5th point. Number 1, if you've seen the last video, this one's going to be a repeat. You must shoot the closest unit. I hate this. Although there is a concession here in that if an enemy is more than 50% in your zone of fire, you can also choose to shoot at them. You have a priority target and basically you have a first target and then an optional target you can choose instead. But if the enemy is not within 50% and one unit is closer, you have to shoot at them. I don't like this. I do like that you have the option to sort of shift the fire, but if the enemy's not within half, then you really have no choice. They're still engaged with you, but they're not engaged in the firefight. It's not a huge, big game breaker. It's not something we house rule in the few games of this we play. Not had many games of this, to be perfectly honest. Not recently, anyway. It's not something that gets house ruled. It's just a little thing that is. It just bugs me. That's a personal thing. I don't like the game forcing you to shoot at the closest unit. Although I do concede that it does have that option in there for firing at a potential unit that if they meet certain criteria. Number 2, the game ends after 50% and then you fail a morale check and the whole army just runs away. I'm not a fan of this. I like my games to go down, as in down, and we see what happens. Of course, if one side is truly smashed, you just call it there. But if you can turn a defeat into a draw, maybe you have a unit of guards. So, okay, let's look at like Waterloo or something. Obviously, Waterloo didn't turn out to be a draw, but the guards form at the end of the battle and cover the retreat of the French army. So maybe in this case we have this fight, and the French are running away. The British are pretty tattered. They're barely over 50%, and they're going to come on. And a French unit of, say, cuirassiers just makes like a suicide charge into the British. You don't get those sort of cinematic moments after you fail that morale test, and the game just ends. I like my games to really run down. After you know you've lost, then you can really go all out, as commanders did, to try and screen your army's retreat, to try and get as many victory points as you can, to try and fulfill last conditions. Maybe to try and break the enemy in the same way, so that both sides are broken. You're still going to lose because you broke first, but I really like that sort of like suicidal last ditch efforts at the end of a game, and I think that having a 50% or bust dice roll sort of takes a little bit of that away. Number 3, I've been alluding to this. It's friggin' hard to get this book. I do not actually have a copy of V2. V2 came out a while ago. I found out it existed a few weeks ago, because when you Google Napoleon at War, you come up with a whole bunch of stuff for Napoleon at War, this copy. Not the V2. And, of course, the company who used to sell this no longer sells it. So, okay. Board Game Geek still have all the files for anyone who wants to actually pick up all the rule sets for this. The rulebook itself is normally available secondhand quite easily on eBay and stuff like that. So, okay, this version 2. I'll Google Napoleon at War version 2. And I got nothing. No links at all. Then I Googled Napoleon at War version 2 for sale. Nothing. Napoleon at War version 2 war game for sale. Nothing. Eventually I found a blog which had a non-hyperlinked link in there, so I had to actually, click, copy, paste, or paste and search. And it sent me to a site which had Napoleon at War, and I found it eventually. It's hidden away in there. You have to click Napoleon at War and then go down the rule books. Why is it evidence category if it's a rulebook? You should just get rid of the rulebooks thing and put. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about his web design. I don't do that. It's actually quite well laid out website. I'm being nitpicky there, sorry, but to find in the website is a bitch. And then you get there and you see this. Now maybe for you more learned people, this means something. To me, I'm like, what is that? How much is this? Is this nothing, or is this what currency is this? It's actually Swiss francs, which I found out immediately after looking. Oh, Swiss francs, but because Switzerland, of course, is not in the European Union. Anyway, you look at it, I was like, what the hell is this? Just the lengths you have to go to actually find and purchase this rulebook is a negative in and of itself, because it's not really marketed that well outside of the circles of the first edition. It's first of all, I don't think you need a second edition. I think it's fine as is. I wouldn't change anything, and I'm not going to. I might buy the second edition just to have it. The cover's not so nice. I prefer the old cover. I'll put a side by side there. I like the older cover. So it's not really to buy to have on the wall or anything. I'll pick it up just to see how it is. But no, I personally like the first edition, and I would encourage you to get the first edition too. There is an expansion book. Again, it's really hard to get because it's out of print. Yeah, I think that's like half the games I've done now are out of print. So I don't know how useful the reviews are going to be, but you can track them down in the era of the internet. Of course, don't sail the high seas for them. I don't encourage that at all. But you can find them on eBay and secondhand book places like that. So that was the sort of 5 and the 3. What makes the game special? Well, what makes the game special is the engagement mechanic, the bubbles around units, the fact that it's a game, the firefight mechanic and the engagement mechanic, the fact that the game is not just I'm going to throw my units in. You have to wait until the enemy's weak. You have to position your artillery in a way as such you can take the enemy down a peg. You have to focus your fire. If you do what the British did, which is spread your artillery out, you're going to have a rough time because you're going to be sort of poppering everywhere. You can support your own units quite well, but you're not going to make breakthroughs. Whereas if you play as in the way Napoleon did with his Grand Battery style thing, you could focus your artillery on the right flank and sort of really weaken them up and then throw your men in and push that flank. Or you can hit the center and push the center or something. Your cavalry are actually useful beyond a psychological impact. Your cavalry can actually put out bubbles where it's like, you're not moving around me. I'm going to maneuver fine because you don't have any cavalry near me, but my cavalry are going to sort of push you back, make it harder for you to react to what I'm doing. Possibly even force you into a square. That is actually a psychological thing a player might do, but yeah, the cavalry are gonna impact the game more than just being a purely psychological thing. They're actually gonna force you to roll dice, and sometimes poorly. Cavalry are also going to screen your army from enemy cavalry. They can charge in. It's just, I think there's so much complexity. I'm literally just reiterating all of my points before. But the feel of the game, it feels Napoleonic. It feels complex enough to be a divisional level Napoleonic game. And I think if you had 3 or 4 of these side by side each other on tables, you could do core level easy. It would be so cool to see. And I think this game really, really gets into not only the Napoleonic spirit, but the Napoleonic tactics, the Napoleonic strategies. Those are 2 different things. I don't know the difference between them, but they are 2 different things. Someone more learned than me can explain the difference between strategy and tactics. It's you actually feel like you're commanding a Napoleonic army. You don't feel like you're commanding a Revolutionary War army. You don't feel like you're commanding an army in the Franco-Prussian War. It feels Napoleonic. You're using your cavalry the way a Napoleonic officer would. You're using your infantry the way that they would. You're using your units the way that their faction says they would. It's just so, you just feel like you're playing a Napoleonic game. The whole game is designed around that principle. The principle of this is just something special. This is not something you're going to port out. This is not a black powder. This is not even Land of the Free, which is brilliant and is designed for the Americas. Is designed for 3 or 4 different wars. This is, no, we're doing Napoleonic War. There's a campaign book for the 100 days, because there always has to be a campaign book for the 100 days. Anyway, it's built around Napoleonics. You've got your Austrians, you've got your Russians. If you want variety, go play some Austrians. You know, it's built around that, and I really, really love that. So, yeah, that's my review for Napoleon at War. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit like, head on over to OTT, and recommend any more videos, or pop them down in the comments below. It's you can check me out on Twitch at LessR2590. I pop in occasionally to do some stuff. do some painting, do some just hanging out. So, yeah, if you'd like to see more of this stuff, make sure you let me know in the comments below, and thanks.